Okay, thanks, John. Well, we get started on our federal funding workshop. Scott, do you have anything to say before we get started? You want to go straight into?
Yeah, I can introduce you've got two of our partners from McIntyre here. Fiona and Tristan are able to kind of walk us through some slides, and then they'll be available for questions. We've got a number of staff are here too if you want to ask them questions about any interaction we've been having with their federal grants and earmarks and other things that we've got them working on. But I think we'll just spend most of our time kind of handing it off.
Well, first off, really appreciate the opportunity to be here this afternoon, discuss Merchant McIntyre's work with the city. I think we've had the chance to talk with many of you in the past, but for those of you who we have not had a chance to meet with during our previous visits, my name is Tristan Southard. I'm joined by my colleague, Fiona McLeod, and we are from Merchant McIntyre Associates, a DC based government relations firm that is focused on assisting nonprofit organizations, including municipalities, in securing federal funding. Since the beginning of our partnership with River Falls in December of 2022, our team has worked with city leadership and with city personnel to identify and secure federal funding that is directly applicable to the city's priorities. During this afternoon's discussion, our plan is to brief the council on the overarching strategies that are guiding these efforts across several focus areas. Before we get too far into the discussion, I just want to briefly express our appreciation for the city's investment in our partnership between regular check-ins with City Administrator Simpson, with Jennifer Smith, Amy Peterson, Jason from the team, or annual trips to Washington, D.C. by Mayor Tolan and the City Administrator. River Falls has invested significant resources into our partnership. We appreciate the city's commitment to engaging on the federal level, and we hope this discussion serves to highlight the results that this approach has generated, as well as the exciting work that still remains. So for this afternoon, first we'll open by providing an update on what our team is actively observing on the ground in Washington, D.C., including through our interactions with congressional leaders and agency officials. During this section, we also will discuss some of the changes that we're seeing in the availability and implementation of federal funding under the new Trump administration. Then we'll drill down into MM's strategic approach to several of the city's focus areas for federal funding. These focus areas include service transportation, funding for the Kinney Corridor project, investments in public safety, including through the police and fire departments, and investments in economic and community development projects. Finally, we have reserved some time for further discussions about these individual focus areas, as well as general Q&A on what we're observing in Washington. However, we will pause for questions during each section. So by all means, want this to be an active discussion. So starting with the situation analysis, as you are all well aware, the opening months of the new Trump administration, as well as the new Republican-led Congress, have been extremely active. Our process for monitoring these developments includes reviewing changing federal regulations, talking with policymakers, including the city's congressional delegation, and in many cases, monitoring legal actions surrounding several of the administration's actions. In responding to ongoing developments, whether it's the administration pausing or changing requirements for specific grant programs, or Congress determining which types of community projects to fund this year, our goal is to provide River Falls with forward-looking, actionable information that informs our work together and your own internal decision-making processes. With this in mind, here are a few strategic considerations that are informing the strategies that we're going to discuss today. For funding opportunities and solicitations that we are seeing posted from the administration, so the actual posting of grant opportunities or other funding, current federal notices of funding opportunities, RFAs, RFPs, are being actively reviewed by the administration for alignment with the administration's policies in key focus areas such as DEI and environmental policy. To date, this process has resulted in funding opportunities being cleared to move forward, altered, or put on hold. Additionally, significant federal opportunities have moved forward as planned with relatively minor adjustments in the past few months, including flagship grant programs at DOT, DOJ, and the Department of Homeland Security. We'll discuss many of those during our presentation when we get into the specific funding opportunities that we're looking at for the city's priorities. Additionally, we know that the administration is actively reviewing and in many cases changing federally funded programming that was awarded during the previous administration. This process involves revising contracts, changing program activities, or performance measures for a given program. As we've shared with city personnel, we are not currently tracking any specific tangible concerns related to the funding that we've helped the city secure. However, our team remains available to assist in navigating this process should we receive a notice from any of the funding agencies that a grant needs to be reviewed. These changes from the administration are also being felt in our interactions with agency personnel. The Trump administration has initiated substantial initiatives to restructure the federal workforce, including through the Department of Government Efficiency and additional agency-specific activities. We experience this in the form of changing points of contact for a federally funded project, inconsistent or paused communication from agency personnel, or delays in pending federal activities such as awards, payments, or approvals. In addition to what we're seeing going on with the administration, our work is also heavily informed by what is going on in Congress. The two major items playing out in Congress that are relevant to this discussion are the budget reconciliation and the appropriations process. Two separate processes that play a large role in what we see coming out of the federal government in the coming years. So budget reconciliation is the process that is currently receiving the most news coverage by way of the one big beautiful bill that's being considered, was considered in the House and is now being considered in the Senate. Through budget reconciliation, congressional Republicans are able to achieve policy priorities related to border security, defense, energy, tax reform, and implement budget cuts across targeted areas of federal spending. Most importantly, these priorities can be passed through party line, which is why it's such a powerful tool for the new majority. For our purposes, the most important potential impacts of reconciliation are to change funding levels for specific programs that the city might have an interest in. However, based on the most recent version of the bill, that's not really the case for any of the programs that we're going to be discussing this evening. A lot of the attentions around cuts are focused elsewhere. Separately, and probably most importantly for our discussion, Congress has also begun the regular appropriation process. So this is the annual process through which Congress decides what the base funding level across federal agencies is going to be. Budget reconciliation provides an opportunity to plus up or subtract in specific spaces, but the appropriations process is really where the bulk of funding decisions are made. As we will discuss throughout the presentation, this involves bipartisan input, and it includes a significant emphasis on a number of the priorities we're going to discuss, including potential projects, funding for potential projects that the city might be interested in pursuing. So appropriations is really key. That's where we see a lot of funding coming for projects like the fire station a couple years ago, as well as some of the more forward-looking items that we have, like the Kinney project or the police communications project that our team is working on. So before we begin the actual strategy discussion, I want to pause there to see if there are questions on any of these items, keeping in mind that we'll probably be touching on many of them as we get into the strategy discussion. Okay. So the first focus area we want to discuss today is surface transportation. Our team is currently working with River Falls to prepare federal funding applications focused on providing resources for the city's Main Street redevelopment project. These efforts are focused primarily right now on two programs, both of which were funded proactively, so years in advance, by the bipartisan infrastructure law. So the first is the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. So this is a bipartisan infrastructure law funded program focused squarely on roadway safety across users, so vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists. It comes in 3 tracks. In 2023, we were successful in pursuing $200,000 through the Action Plan grant. And this kind of opened the doorway for us to look at other funding through the program. You need to have that action plan either in development or in place in order to be eligible for larger funding awards through the later tracks in this program. So right now, we're currently focused on a demonstration and supplemental planning application. We're developing it with the DPW team, and that's focused on signal optimization as well as some targeted pilot projects for roadway safety. So that's under development. We would be submitting that application this month. Further down the road, once the action plan is finalized, we'll also have the opportunity as early as spring 2026 to apply for implementation funding. So these awards can range from 2.5 million to 25 million. Significant funding, and it has to be focused on roadway safety measures that are identified in that action plan. So once again, we come back to that action plan really being central to further funding. The other opportunity we're looking at is the better utilizing investments to leverage development grant program. That name is new to me because as of a year ago, it was called RAISE. When new administrations come in, they tend to change the name of this program. But this is really DOT's flagship infrastructure program focused on either planning or implementation grants for transformative surface transportation projects. We are looking at this as potentially a vehicle to move, the bulk of the Main Street project. I think as we look at a potential post date in November and a due date in early 2026, this is an application that our team will start working on relatively soon because it takes a significant amount of data, information to really drive the development process for that application. I also want to note that for both of these opportunities, our approach is being informed and driven by engagement that we had with Secretary Duffy's office during Mayor Toland and City Administrator Simpson's visit to Washington, D.C. in March. During that meeting, we heard directly from the Secretary's Chief of Staff regarding the new administration's approach to these opportunities, and this feedback has really played a critical role in informing how we plan to approach them. From the standpoint of summarizing our overall strategy for these surface transportation projects, it's important to understand the sequence of our anticipated funding opportunities. So starting in December 2023, when we first were successful in securing funding for the city's Safe Streets Action Plan, that really unlocks our ability to compete into what we're seeing now. So August 2024, City Council played a role in the approval of that grant agreement for the action plan, and it's now currently under development. In June of this year, like we said, we'll be applying for the demonstration track using the action plan that's currently under development to give us access. As soon as we're done with the Safe Streets grant, we will roll directly into development of the Build grant. Like I said, this is a month-long development process that requires a lot of data, a lot of input from the DPW team here, and will require pre-developed components like a benefit cost analysis for the entirety of the project. Our anticipated release date for that funding opportunity is in November, at which point we would expect a due date in January. So Build is what we see, I think, as one of the major vehicles potentially funding the bulk of the Main Street project. That being said, we expect that we will also have opportunities through the Safe Streets Action Plan. Once that's completed, we can look at the implementation track, which would come up in summer of 2026. So regardless of the result of Build, we can also look at Safe Streets as a vehicle to potentially move some of the significant pieces of the Main Street project. We're going to have two major opportunities coming up to fund that. These programs are incredibly competitive. That's why we are really emphasizing this opportunity to have multiple opportunities. The last cycle of Build, when it was raised, only included 2 projects in the entire state of Wisconsin, and that was the same for a lot of states across the country. So our strategy is really intended to give the city multiple opportunities to secure funding. Additionally, it's very important that we leverage the engagement that we've had with DOT, the engagement that we have with the city's congressional delegation to give the city's application the highest possible competitive edge. Our team will be meeting with city leadership and planning personnel tomorrow to start discussing the specific next steps in the process for both Build and Safe Streets implementation so that we can really start working on these applications in earnest. Any questions on surface transportation?
So the range was from 2.5 to 25 million. Are there guidelines you have to meet, or are there criteria you have to meet to get more, or is it just the scope of your project that'll help them decide how much money they would give?
Yeah, it's important. That's a great question. It's important for the Safe Streets implementation grants, as we've observed them so far. They're really going to be looking back at what was approved in the action plan. So as part of that action plan process, we're going to include, feasibly estimates for how much some of these the projects would cost. Ultimately, DOT is going to be looking back at that action plan to say, was this identified as a safety priority through the planning process? How much did you say it was going to cost in the plan? So it's a bit of both. There'll be some referencing back to the action plan, and the scope will have to make sense for the project.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on surface transportation? Okay. So next I want to talk a little bit about the Kinney Corridor project. So to date, the Merchant McIntyre team's support has focused really on the core in their partnership with the city on removing the Junction Falls and Powell dams. A primary reason for this emphasis on the dam removal piece is that it's, as you all know better than us, it's the focal point of the project, and it must be, substantively planned and implemented before we can really start thinking about many of the sub-projects in the surrounding area. In thinking about the city's partnership with the Corps, our work is really focused on two components. So the authorization piece. So this is the approval from Congress for the Corps to work with River Falls on the project. For River Falls, this comes through the Continuing Authorities Section 206 program, which is focused on ecosystem restoration. This is essentially the ticket to the game. We have to have the authorization in place in order to work with the Corps. Thankfully, this 206 program provides a little bit more flexibility in that the Corps has permission from Congress to administer this the way that they want to, so long as they have funding to do it. We don't have to keep going back to Congress for permission to do different parts of the project. It's really within the Corps' authority to carry out the program. On the other side of that is the appropriation. So the actual funding from Congress for the Corps to carry out the different activities that they are authorized to conduct with the city. The Corps receives an annual appropriation from Congress, which is allocated to projects across the country based on a prioritization process that is taken at Army Corps headquarters and with the White House's Office of Management and Budget. Both really important sides of the overall funding consideration for the project. So as I think you all know, last year our team was able to organize a meeting for Mayor Toland and City Administrator Simpson with staff at Army Corps HQ. During this meeting, the strong advice that we got from the staff was to do everything we could to keep the project within the Continuing Authorities 206 program. This presented some concerns as the tentatively selected plan began to take shape because of its anticipated cost tag at the time, which was, as you all know, north of $19 million. Under the 206 program's previous, its current requirements, there's a 65% federal share, and the Corps' share of that would be roughly $12 million. This represented a bit of a concern based on the program's $10 million cap at the time. So only $10 million of investment through the Corps. So what we developed with the city, discussed with the city's congressional delegation, was language in congressional legislation to raise that cap to $15 million, essentially giving the Corps more leeway to spend more money on this project. And that language was included in the Water Resources Development Act for 2024. So, signed into law as we look towards the implementation phase. Once the feasibility study is done, this will ideally give the city and the Corps more flexibility to work together on the project. At the same time, the appropriations piece is just as important. We have the permission to work together. We need the funding to work together. So sustained funding through the core is going to be essential as this project moves forward from the feasibility stage to implementation. For this upcoming fiscal year, we worked with the city to request $1.85 million in congressionally directed spending for the core to begin the implementation of the Kinney Corridor project. So this presupposes that the feasibility study is done, and this funding would come in to begin the engineering and design process for the core in the coming year. If awarded, ideally this sets the project on a really solid foundation to continue moving forward year over year. Our experience and our specific concern with the new administration is that we want to get this off the ground so that it makes sense to continue funding it year over year. In the current budget reality that we're living in, it's more challenging to get programs off the ground. So we really want that secured congressional investment year over year to keep the project going. Any questions on the Kinney Corridor project? Okay. Well, I will hand it over to Fiona to talk a little bit about public safety.
Thank you, Tristan. So we're going to break public safety funding down into two categories, the police funding and the fire department funding. So I want to start with the funding that we have secured thus far. Through the congressionally directed spending or community project funding process in FY24, we were able to secure $1.4 million for the firehouse fire station renovations. And this is, the first step in a long process, but that was secured and signed into law thanks to Congressman Derek Van Orden. It's still pending for the fire station and the police department. We have the communications equipment. We have both the communications towers as well as the portable radios, and those were also selected by Congressman Derek Van Orden for the FY26 community project funding process. Now that funding level is currently at $862,000. So we are expecting to be able to complete the project at that amount. This was the same amount that was selected last year before the continuing resolution was passed. Upcoming, we have a couple of options for the fire department specifically. We're looking at FEMA for the Assistance for Firefighters Grant Program, or AFGs, it's commonly known. And after discussions today with both the fire chief and the police chief, we've decided to look at a water tender as a potential funding option, the ladder truck as a funding option, the SCBA equipment, as well as additional radios that can be used for the department, as all of these are aging or currently not able to be used. So that funding cycle should start in the fall of this year, but we are going to be constantly monitoring what FEMA is going to put out and make sure that the priorities of the city are going to align with the priorities of FEMA. Any questions on public safety funding? No? Okay, awesome. So we're going to now transition to the community and economic development funding. We try to look for economic development opportunities wherever they lie. Most notably, we have the library renovation project. This was a $4 million flexible facilities project through the state government that we were awarded last summer to allow for a full renovation of the inside of the library. We were very fortunate to work with all staff of the library as well as city staff to be able to kind of get this grant over the finish line with very short notice. We only had about a month once we found out about the grant to submit, and we were thankfully awarded. Next is the St. Croix Valley Business Innovation Center. We have several grants pending currently. We have the Rural Business Development Grant Program through the United States Department of Agriculture for $55,000. It's currently pending. We should learn about this grant in the next couple of weeks to months. Usually early summer is the timeline that we hear. We have about a $2.1 million expansion project that's currently in front of the Economic Development Administration that'll allow for new businesses to come in, especially those food-ready spaces that'll allow for the expansion of the current businesses there, as well as the introduction of new businesses to come into the Innovation Center. And finally, we have a request in front of Senator Baldwin for $350,000 to renovate and enhance the co-working spaces currently in the Innovation Center as an effort to draw more people in that are currently already involved with the Innovation Center, but are not finding the space as comfortable as, say, their own home. So we're trying to make that space more ideal for all of them and hopefully bring a more lively environment. Any questions there? Okay. Continuing on with economic and community development, we have identified several areas through our meetings today, as well as continued conversations with city staff. So we're going to be targeting the following areas as we look for grants and other funding opportunities at the federal level, the state level, and as well as some private sector and foundation opportunities. We're going to start with the Man Valley Corporate Park through housing and business attraction and as many advancements as we can possibly have to the area to just attract businesses. We're going to look at clean water and wastewater infrastructure, additional city facilities such as the generator replacement. Affordable housing has been a need that has been brought to us multiple times, as well as recreational park and trail projects, as we had a lengthy discussion about those today. Merchant McIntyre is well positioned to assist the city with all of these possibilities. We are positioned to navigate every funding stream we can, not just at the federal level, but again at the state and private sector level as well. And we are positioned to kind of navigate the changing funding landscape as we move forward with this administration as things change down the line. I think we're now in the Q&A discussion area. So thank you very much.
Well, does anybody have any questions to start with?
I have a question. Thank you both, Tristan and Fiona. Housing is a top priority in River Falls, and I know what I would like to see is if you can help discover how our TID money would best align with federal monies in developing deep subsidized housing and low-income housing, and identifying what an action plan would look like for the future, if possible, with our staff. And thank you for all that you do.
We appreciate the question, and once again, really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all. I think we've heard loud and clear the affordable housing priorities. I think the challenge that we have and that we've shared before is, I think this is an area where most folks would agree that the federal government is behind in investing in something that municipalities, I know that we work with across the country, we hear about it regularly. The challenge that we have is that a lot of the discretionary funding that's available at the federal level, much of it comes through the state, and a lot of it has very high barriers to entry. We often end up looking kind of on the front end, where is there funding that we can look at in the transportation, utility, water space, where we can get federal investment on the front end to enable housing development, but the investments that are needed on the back end for the actual support of the development just isn't where it should be. One area that we've explored has been in the congressionally directed spending category. I think a lot of lawmakers feel that they don't, the discretionary grant opportunities aren't out there, so CDS funding is a route that they can use to provide that funding in the absence of those grants. There are targeted opportunities that we've looked at as well with the city focused on primarily maintenance and upkeep and improvements to existing affordable housing. So we see those opportunities at HUD. The investment that is needed, I think, to advance the establishment of new housing stock is something that Congress is aware of, but as with all things, it's getting that bipartisan agreement and the ability to move forward on it has just been, it's a challenging legislative environment, but we understand it's a priority for you all. We continue to hunt those opportunities as we're able, and ideally, as we look towards future CDS cycles or future grant opportunities, it's something we're certainly keeping in mind.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything? Questions?
I've got kind of a general question. I know that City Administrator Simpson and Mayor Toland make regular visits to Washington, D.C., but if you've got tips for the rest of us as to anything we could do to assist you in helping River Falls stay top of mind for our elected officials, I'd appreciate any suggestions you might have.
Sure. Yeah, well, we greatly appreciate the engagement from the mayor and the city administrator. I think, as we've shared with them, it makes leagues of difference in our engagement. We have more frank conversations, I think, with agency officials. You all have the relationships with the congressional delegation. It makes the conversations just generally more productive. So we appreciate that engagement. I would say, we appreciate the opportunities to come here and talk with you all. It really helps us inform what we're doing. I think that the engagement and relationships that you all have and bring to the table is really important as well. And we certainly welcome opportunities as we think about specifically when we talk about the build grant. The level of engagement that's going to be required to be successful in that is not just federal engagement, but relationships with state and local elected officials as well. So I think being successful in that department is really going to be kind of all hands on deck, where we're going to be regularly reporting to the city administrator, the planning team, about how important it is that we're engaging in the community and with the state officials too. So I think at the federal level and at the state level, we're going to see a lot more opportunities in the coming year, especially for more engagement. So we appreciate the council's willingness to undertake that and help us do it, because securing that level of federal funding through such a competitive program is really going to require it.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. That was too easy. Do you guys have anything else?
I think, I think we're, like I said, we appreciate it. We appreciate the time. We appreciate the commitment to the process. I hope, we can continue to keep these as active conversations, especially, I know over the next month, especially when we look at the congressionally directed spending awards that we're hopefully pursuing for the city, we're going to have a lot of updates. So we'll continue to share that with the city team and hope to keep the conversation going with you all as well.
Okay.
Mayor,
I have a question.
Yep.
We all know it's competitive out there, the federal government, they take from 10 people so they can pay off one. And I mean, that's close to the ratio. Maybe it's even 20 to 1. But what separates River Falls from the rest of the competition? Is it you guys communicating it? Is it the mayor and the administrator? What has given us an advantage that we can outdo the other 9 or 19 people we're competing against?
Yeah. Well, I think, we view it very much as investing the time and effort that you all have in federal funding. Not everyone does that. I know we've shared that before, but it really does make a difference. I don't think many municipalities would be engaging in something as minute as the cap on a Section 206 grant, quite the way that River Falls has. Those are big policy discussions that happen amongst associations and amongst members of Congress. So the ability to engage on an issue like that that's so important to the Kinney project really is important, and it's transformational. But we view it as the work that you all are doing, the investment that you've made in the time to undertake that engagement. But I'll also just say, as we work with the city staff and familiarize ourselves with the city, we're lucky enough for this to be our 3rd time being here. There's a lot that we have to write into these applications or to share with the officials that we're talking about. The city's forward-looking approach to sustainability, the development that's going on in Mayan Valley, the uniqueness of the Kinney, and the role that it plays in the community are all compelling. And we're just the folks who are lucky enough to make that case. Those are the assets that you all are bringing to the table. So we really feel strongly about it. I think when we look at some of the funding opportunities that are coming up, like the build grant, one thing that we were sharing with the team today is with the new administration, we're talking about things in a little bit different of a way than we were a year ago. Whereas a year ago, we might have been talking more about, you know, accessibility for uh, employment or, you know, general recreation. Now we're thinking about it more in the context of accessibility for the purposes of commerce. Is it easy for folks to get from housing developments down across the Kinney and into downtown? Those types of arguments, they're changing. Many of them are the same. We're relying on the same strengths that the city has, but we're framing them in a different way. But we wouldn't be able to do that if you all didn't have so many great things going on here. So it really is, you know, we appreciate the partnership. We feel lucky to work with you all, but you certainly bring a lot to the table that makes our jobs easier.
Mayor, just a couple comments on that. I think that is a good question, like how are we being successful? And others are starting to ask us, other cities are trying to ask us that too now. So, but I think the council can take some credit there and should, that one of the starting points that I see in a successful strategy, and we've talked about this with Merchant McIntyre, is the community has to have priorities and they have to be willing to sustain that outlook for the long term. Because if you have multiple priorities, you don't have any. And then if you don't have a sustained look on the outlook, Washington doesn't seem that interested in working with you, right? Because they don't have any belief that this is they'll just wait for the next mayor, the next council, the next administrator. If they don't want to do it, they're not bugged or bothered by a few little chirpings. But if you have a consistent priority and they're hearing that same message, so to Councilmember Rodine's point, if they can call you and get the same message that they've heard from the mayor in Washington, they can hear it from you at the farmer's market. That's very powerful for them because frankly, they want to work with people that have their acts together. So, and then we've made some strategic decisions, I think, that have been helpful. So I'll just remind us of those. We have agreed that we will be focused on the priorities of ours that align with federal priorities. So we may not chase, now it happens, we've been pretty good that we've been having our top priorities aligned, but if they didn't, we would go to our fourth. Because we're not gonna bang our head on the federal door knowing that it's not a priority for them. And housing is a good example of that. There is crickets from the federal government about housing. And so if we can say, it's our number one priority, we're not gonna look at anything else but that, we're gonna only seek those funds. The mayor and I can fly out, we can have our meetings and we'll feel good that we told them what our priority was, but we won't have success because if you don't align with the federal priorities, I don't think you're gonna make anything happen. And we know that that's constantly changing, and that's part of the reason we're using Merchant McIntyre is because they're able to help us understand, okay, what's going on now? So we've got this sustained vision. Things have changed in the federal government. How can we still achieve that? And can we still? I mean, if it's written off by the new administration, that counts. If the new Congress writes it off, that counts. We can't just say, well, that's not fair. They have to go back to the way that it used to be. And we also have to be ready to take that opportunity if changes occur in the administration or the congressional delegation that align with those priorities. And so we're doing that planning, we're having that consistent message, and then you have all said, hold your nose or not, we're gonna go after federal money, right? So we're making a decision as a strategy that this money is there, we're gonna go aggressively, it's gonna be a priority, and we're gonna go try to capture as much of it back for the community as you can. And there's certainly other policy decisions we could make. We could say we don't wanna be part of this, we don't wanna do that game, we just want them to lower the income taxes and it would be better if we all keep our money in town. That's a reasonable policy reaction to the system we have. Another reasonable one is that money is out there. It's going to be spent on public safety, transportation, community development. We should try to bring as much of that back. So, I mean, we have to be honest about our approach, which is we're going to go out there and get it. We're going to make a priority. So I would say this is right plan, right place, right time, and right ask. That's how our strategy seems to be working. I don't want to trade that mark that so Merchant McIntyre can't take it. But that's been, To boil it down as much as I can, that's kind of been, the success, but it takes all kinds of people to have to help us, right? We're being helped by people we don't even know. We don't know what conversation, we don't know all of the conversations that some member of a club, organization, church, whatever is having with their congressional delegation that's influencing this. But we know that we keep having that consistent message and we put our plans out so that the community knows, yeah, this is our plan. We're going forward with it. And so then that helps also. So again, right plan, right place, right time, and then you gotta have the right ask. Because we may not get everything we want. We may not be able to get as much as we think we need, but we're trying to make the asks as reasonable as possible. And we're using the good information we get on the ground to inform that so that we're realistic. You know, if we have a $25 million idea, but the grant max is 2 million, well, we ought to be able to figure out that we should think about the 23 million that we need before we go ask for the 2. So, it's been pretty fun. I mean, this has been a good thing for us. It's really good to see kind of when a plan comes together, when you put a strategy together and everybody works pretty hard at it consistently. And we have to be patient, right? It doesn't happen as fast as we want it to. But sometimes it happens faster than we could even imagine, like the library grant, right? It was like we had these plans, we had things aligned, and we're like, let's go. That would be the exception to the grant rules. These things are going to take sustained effort over a number of years. We're glad to be, the staff is glad to be part of it. We're happy to have the partner. But don't forget that you have all said, this is what you want to do, and you've given us the ability to implement that strategy. And you put time, money, and resources into it.
Scott, I have a question for you. So we've been doing this for 3 years, and it's maybe an unfair question, but is this something that we will continue forever? Or do you think there's a time limit that at the end of this decade, or that it might be done? Or I know we'll review it every year, but what's your insight or your feelings towards it?
My feeling is we've got enough opportunity, unless there's a change on council, meaning council can say, we're gonna stop this, it's not a strategy anymore, we don't wanna do this. Or we don't like the list that we've laid out for you. If that's not the case, if you're happy with the list and the direction and the strategy, we've probably got 3 or 4 years at least that we need to pursue this stuff with a sustained approach to think about being successful. I do think every year it makes sense to do this and take a look at it. Maybe not every year, maybe every couple of years if I had my way, but we'll continue to review this partnership. But forever is a long time. Perhaps there'll be a whole change in Congress and they'll just go per capita funding for cities, and they'll eliminate all these categorical programs. I think it's unlikely. I actually advocated that in my earlier days at another city. Like, why are we doing this? It'd be easier just to give us back per capita, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I think we'll be in it as long as the council is willing to be in it. Because I think we're going to be able to show sustained results for a while and build upon itself. And then certainly you're going to get to a point as a council where we'll have had all this success and maybe we don't have success for 2 or 3 years. And then the question is going to be, well, what have you done for me lately? And the question will be, well, look at 2023, 24, 25. But that's a policy question for the council so I think you get to answer your own question.
Don't you think we'll be chasing something new every year? It's always evolving. Where there'll be something new. There'll be a new squirrel to chase. Or
yeah, I think if we're gonna keep spending money to provide services, there's gonna be reason for us to go and look at that again, unless you change your fundamental strategy. Or there's a new, they get rid of the federal income tax and then we go to state income taxes on a local level. It would have to be some pretty major changes for us to just say, well, this isn't working at all. I think so far, It's been a significant and documented success.
Mr. Mayor, I have one more question.
Yeah.
When you talked about finding alignment, there is an opportunity, and I believe that, you know, when you look at the Glen Park pool, that's about an 85-year-old pool. That's one step to potentially catastrophic, which would be very expensive for the city to replace. So I know that if you were to look through priorities and alignment, if the other ones don't fit as much, that might be a really good one to get, because it would save us a lot of money if we had grants going into that. Because we do have a blueprint that can be used to get those grants. And could you give me your outlook on something like that?
So I think the way that we have approached our partnership with the city has been, we look at these broad areas to the points that Scott's raised. You know, a lot of our work has been guided by the legislative agenda that you all set out at the beginning of the year. As you would be able to tell from our presentation, we try to align with that, with the opportunities that we explore. We will come to town, and you know, it's important for us to be here to hear about projects like that, because, you know, the library, we were here last year, and then a month later we applied for our grant, because it turned out we got here, we talked about a state level opportunity, all of the pieces were in place for us to go after that. And it turned out to be, you know, a big success. So for us to have visibility on projects like that, where there is a plan in place, that makes it more compelling for federal funders. It then becomes a matter of us finding what that federal opportunity is. You know, in general, we had a long conversation, as Fiona outlined, with the team this afternoon about parks and trails projects. We have to get a little bit more creative there, just because so much of the federal money is either focused on how can we make this fit into a transportation or economic development project. So we get a little bit more creative when we look at the state and local level. And that's certainly the sort of funding that I think we would look at for a project like that. So it's good for us to know about it, because it informs what we keep an eye out for.
Thank you.
Yeah, Fiona, something.
And just to add quickly, this is something that Emily had said in our meeting earlier. The more that we go after grants and federal funding that does align with the city's top priorities and priorities at the federal level, it frees up money in your budget for some of those projects that are typically not commonly funded by the federal level. So there's always room for budget maneuvering as we can fund some of these top line items and reduce the city's liability or responsibility there. We can look at it that way too, as a way to be creative.
Thanks again.
Mr. Mayor, if I might. Yeah. So do you have, or do we have access to any kind of an index or compilation of projects that you are working on or have worked on in other communities that we can review, or is that already happening? I don't know. So that we can sort of look at it and say, hey, we're not ready for this for, you know, on our CIP in 6 years is this, but if that project is having success at another community in Virginia, maybe we can, you know, why recreate the wheel? Is that happening, or is that?
That's part of our communications meeting, like
Okay,
in the 2
that's good
days
to
we're here. So if you guys want an alligator mascot,
Yeah.
we understand that that's something you've secured in Louisiana. So
No.
we said no thanks. But no, we're learning. They're coming with their proprietary information, somewhat proprietary. Obviously, if you get an award, it's public, but they're also giving us insight on the things that they are pursuing and
Okay.
what roadblocks or freeways they're finding, right? So if they find a freeway and they're like, hey, you know, you're a lot like this city in Missouri, we really ought to try to do the program this way. And on the same token, if they're like, yeah, we've tried to get fire tender in the last 6 budgets in this town, FEMA just doesn't, they're not feeling it, you're not going to get that money, then we can pivot to something else.
Okay.
Because again, we're trying to be flexible. We need to stay in our priority zone, but we also need to understand that it's not exactly a rank ordered choice. It's
Right.
we rank them, you all rank them, and then we're trying to figure out, well, if we have a 0% chance on number 2, but a 70% chance on 3 and 100% chance on 5, well, then we have to make a decision about 3 versus 5. And we may even come back to you at some point and say that very thing, like, hey, we can only pursue one of these two things. We think this has got a better chance of succeeding, but it's lower on your priority list. That hasn't been the tough decisions at this point. Like the library was one. It's like, hey, we got a really good chance. We probably got a 50-50 chance of getting this money. Let's get our time into that, even though it was probably on the CIP, farther down the list. It seemed to be a good fit. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
Or
that,
answer your
I'm
question.
happy to hear that. I mean, I'm sure from Merchant McIntyre's standpoint, they don't want to have two of their communities competing for the same pot of money and go, uh-oh, one of them's going to lose. So,
Yeah, that's possible, but we also have, we have an agreement with them that they're looking for clients that aren't exactly like us and clients that might be in different situations than us too. Which then may not give us as many examples, but also avoid some of that. Although there's some synergy. If you're going now, I imagine if you need to go to the Water Resource Development Act for another community, you've established a relationship there. You've done it for River Falls. Now you can do something else. But is it fair to call you boutique? Is that what you?
Yeah,
I mean, they're
not
not-
everyone comes up with alligator mascots.
That's right. I mean, they're not looking for 1,000 clients. Maybe they're bosses, but
How many communities do you represent?
That's a good question. So we work across multiple sectors. So it's municipalities, higher education, healthcare, and then general nonprofits. So I believe we're upwards of 80, 90 clients now. I don't have the exact number of municipalities, but to Scott's point, geographic distribution is important. We make sure that we're not competing against ourselves. I'll just build off of what Scott was saying, whether it's an alligator mascot or a way that we frame a specific police communications project. We try to bring examples of, hey, we've seen this work elsewhere. Why don't we think about our project this way? Because we've seen it win. That's not just the work we've done. We spend a lot of time analyzing programs where maybe we didn't win, and we look and see what did and compare it to our own work so that we can get better. The one area that I'll also just highlight is our work around congressionally directed spending is relationship driven. As you all have experienced, we rely on the city and the city council to have strong relationships with your congressional delegation. However, a lot of it's data driven as well. We spend a lot of time analyzing what is winning, what is getting funded, what is that price point where we can have a feasible project. And that really is analysis of everything that's coming out of Congress. So we pride ourselves on that. It drives our approach and, thankfully has seen results so far.
back to the state issue for just a second, and it was good to have the library jump in, but any help that we can get with regard to mental health or our healthcare facilities for those in need of help. That's more of a regional ask probably than it is a local ask. It's not like we're gonna build a mental health facility here, but that's a priority that I have, and that's when I'm having conversations with our state elected folks, that's
Sure.
first one I bring up.
We definitely discussed some opportunities today with the public safety team, specifically out of the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, particularly around rural EMS access or rural EMS training for mental health crises and substance abuse response.
Good.
So those are grants we're going to be looking at down the road. And then if you'd like, you can also look into some partnerships with local healthcare organizations. Maybe we can do some more robust actions there as well.
That would be great. I defer to Chief Young. He's deep in that stuff. So, but I just would like to see some movement that gets some action rather than us dragging people all the way across the state.
Sure. And we certainly understand from sitting in on the city's legislative priorities session, we were fortunate to be able to attend that and listen in. We understand that there are things that have to move at the state level. We're not seeing the same level of, capital funding or investment in facilities at the federal level as we might see at the state, but to the points that Fiona raises, there are a number of opportunities that we can explore that provide programmatic support, staffing, resources, training, to increase capacity to hopefully support some of that work that needs
I'm
to happen
sure
at the state level.
anything we get would be helpful.
Sure.
Anybody else have anything? No? Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for the
Thank you.
update. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I think we can,
We didn't ask
Vern,
them
or-
if they wanted to work for us forever.
yeah, that's true.
I don't know about that. I mean,
For every long time.
we're not going anywhere.
Okay, I think we can adjourn this and get ready for the council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your
Really
time.
appreciate the time.
It'll be a tough one. Should take all 10 minutes.